Hello! Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you happen to be looking at this. Okay, so why does this look different than the normal In Bob We Trust has kind of looked? Though I guess I've done kind of stand-up live feed video type things before. Well, as you might know, if you've seen other videos, there will be like a Patreon explainer video going up to explain changes that are coming to the channel and to my general work output. Before this show, In Bob We Trust existed, if you're among the newer fan base to the series, I did another show called The Big Picture on a channel called The Escapist that I was previously with that ended, not on my terms, that the In Bob We Trust was kind of a successor series basically to the Big Picture, where they were similar in style, using different image formats basically. Recently, as you might have heard, The Escapist has come under new and improved management, which is to say previous to the previous and better management, and in some of their better management decisions have made is hiring me back to bring the Big Picture back to fruition. And yeah, I'm going to do that, and that means that In Bob We Trust, being a Big Picture like show, would be continuing to be so, would be this is why I usually script these things previously, would be kind of redundant and sort of pointless and frankly boring to be doing two different versions of the same kind of show. So that's partially why now it can be told that I took the In Bob We Trust off of, basically put it on a semi-hiatus for a little while there, and kind of workshopped a few different ways to bring it back. And what I think I'm leaning toward, we'll see how the response to this goes, is to bring it back, along with other shows you've been seeing. I've been trying pilots out on the channel. Before anything else new comes to the channel, what I want to do is to finish up and release really that good Star Wars. It's a long time coming. I need to get it done. I know that, and it's coming. But what my decision is on how to bring In Bob We Trust back to regular rotation is to get it into even more of a regular rotation by swapping out, since the Big Picture is going to keep the slideshow video presentation happy swapping faces format. Hopefully the Big Picture will have relaunched pretty soon, and you'll get to see what that looks like. Is to kind of rework In Bob We Trust into this sort of live vlogging, semi-scripted, reacting to the news of the day, put a video up whenever I want to put a video up format that will get more videos up onto the channel and give you more content to watch, which should hopefully keep the subscriber base going and get more viewers to the channel and get a lot more out there to say, since you're going to have another weekly produced show of mine to watch in the In Bob We Trust Big Picture style format coming. I'll have a scripted Patreon explainer video laying out in a little more detail how that would work, but we're trying this out now, and I figured that doing a follow-up, now that there's sort of news but not really news, more on the last video that I put out was about the Rehire, #Rehire James Gunn situation. I figured that I would do a follow-up on that and use that as the occasion to try out the new style, the possible new style for In Bob We Trust as a live video reaction show. So I hope you like how this works, because this is probably where I'm going to keep going with this. In any case, you should probably go back and watch the original Rehire James Gunn video to bring yourself up to speed. But, chances are, if you're watching this, you know what the deal is all about on there. Anyway, the quote-unquote new news on that is Variety late last night, which is kind of the first indicator that this is both a story and not necessarily a story, ran an article with no sources, no named sources, and no official quotes that basically says Disney is sticking with the original decision made by Alan Horn. So specifically, Disney chairman Alan Horn sticking with his original decision to fire James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because of old tweets of nasty jokes from his Twitter feed that were publicly available and that no one really cared about back then, and no one has cared about for about 6 years, but that alt-right Donald Trump supporting trolls led by rape apologist Mike Cernovich dug up in order to and basically launched a fake outrage campaign pretending to be concerned about these in order to essentially gaslight Disney into disciplining and firing this guy from his movie, which is bullshit and sucks and is just horrible. And, regardless of whether or not you think that he should have at least apologized for making these jokes, which he did years ago, multiple times, by the way. As I said in the previous video, the main reason to be for the rehiring of James Gunn, or at least Disney not capitulating on this bullshit, is as resistance to this kind of these guys are basically Nazis. Is what this comes down to. These alt-right people. That's what it all comes down to. If you scratch the surface of what they're at, whatever they say they're at, you always find, some white supremacist, right-wing, super Republican Trumper bullshit underneath it. And denying those people a win in any way, shape, or form possible should really, in my opinion, if you're a decent person, just stopping those people from having any kind of forward progress in anything they want should always be the most paramount thing in any given situation. If they want something, you should be against it happening in just about any situation. That's where I'm at. In any case, a lot of people are taking this Variety story as a final word on the subject, that Disney is not budging, that he's not going to get rehired. For a while, there was a back and forth business that essentially Alan Horn, who's the main guy high up, the guy in terms of these decisions, is the one step below Bob Iger, the head of Disney, had made this decision and he wasn't going to go back on it. Despite the fact that the cast of the movie has been openly, publicly petitioning for the guy to get rehired, supposedly, though not publicly, but behind the scenes, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, the Marvel vertical within Disney, has been petitioning for him to be rehired. A massive online fandom campaign, hashtag Rehire James Gunn, has been petitioning for him to be rehired. There's a fan petition close to 400,000 signatures by now, asking for him to be rehired. It's generally been a massive push for him to be rehired. It is looking like the person with the final say on making that decision does not want to acquiesce to that, which is bullshit and horrible. If indeed that remains to be the case, I'm going to get into how likely that is a little ways into this. But assuming for a moment that is finally the case, again, this is a Variety story that broke very late into the evening on a Wednesday, breaking about, late evening in LA time, so very late evening everywhere else time, which is usually a pretty good indicator that something is less an official story than something that someone wanted out in the trades to look like an official story. Other good indicators that it's also not an official statement from Disney. It didn't have a quote from anyone specific. It didn't have a quote, period. It didn't name a source. There's no official press release. There was no follow-up comment from anyone involved. So it's basically just reporting that the situation has not changed and that meetings that were already reported on happening, follow-up meetings between Alan Horn, James Gunn, various people, had not moved the needle on this thing. So it's sort of non-news as news, but definitely not the news that people were looking for, and at the very least, someone wanted the narrative in the press to turn around to, whereas the narrative for a couple days had been, hey, there's a chance that he could be coming back and that Disney could be doing the right thing, someone wanted the narrative to flip around to, they're probably not. Who that's coming from, who knows? That could be coming from the studio wanting people to, get used to the idea that this is what happened. It could be coming from James Gunn's people wanting to re-energize the fact that they'd like it to come back. If he, in fact, wants the resistance whole thing, the Rehire hashtag, to be going on, he has actually not had anything to say about the movement on his behalf. It's sort of been everyone else speaking on his behalf, which is not unusual. I've made my position on it, I should think, pretty fucking clear. I think the whole thing is bullshit. You cannot... I would say that letting him go over this sort of thing is bullshit in any context. If people had, if legitimate, if actual, honest, decent people who, actually mattered had looked at these things and said, oh my god, I'm so outraged, I'm so offended by this thing from 6 years ago that I didn't know about and that he already apologized for and is already water under the bridge, I would still call that bullshit. But the fact that it's a bunch of fucking Nazis, the fact that it's a bunch of fucking internet forum 4chan Nazi fucks pretending to be outraged because they want to fuck with him because he said disparaging things about the fascist Donald Trump, who these little jagoffs decided they love so much because he triggers the libs. It's triple bullshit because of that. But anyway, like I said, the news item is actually not much of a news item because it's not telling us anything new. It's mostly just reframing and repeating a story that's already been reported. And if you don't follow, Hollywood trade gossip stuff, it can be difficult to see through or understand what they're trying to get you to think and what this is supposed to mean and the stuff that's likely going on behind the scenes with this. Now, one thing I do want to say up front before I go into, basically explaining some of that, or at least giving, my take on an explanation of that, is a lot of people are saying about this, jumping already in, if this is the case, if he's not directing the movie, if they have indeed fired him, kicked him out, whatever, someone else directs Guardians of the Galaxy 3, we're going to boycott him, we're going to boycott all the Marvel movies, we're going to boycott Disney. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. If you think you want to do that to you want to feel better about that for yourself, if you're not comfortable doing it, someone else directs Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and you say, they took this away from its director and I think that sucks and I want to boycott it, go for it. If that's feels like a moral thing to you. But I'm going to echo Lindsay Ellis, who in her most recent video, was a Q&A and she was asked about this. In this day and age, in situations like this, boycotts don't really do shit against movies like this. Boycotts don't work. The only time you hear about boycotts and people claim they work is when something fails for or doesn't do great for various other reasons, and people attach a boycott thing that you can't prove had an effect one way or another to it, Solo, for example, and then try to claim it and glom onto it. Generally speaking, boycotts against giant corporations and movies or TV shows in the age of the internet and digital commerce and globalism don't actually work. There's too many people buying it, it's too big, and even if it did work, even if conceivably you did stay home and, you're gonna personally knock down the box office of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, what exactly have you done? They've already made the movie. You are not gonna really fuck Alan Horn's job. You're not gonna hurt the executives' jobs. You're not gonna, kick any of those vice presidents' asses. They're nice and secure. The people who would theoretically get affected by that are down the line and below the line Disney employees and production people, and mostly you're fucking over concession stand employees and ushers in movie theaters who, are getting paid by who shows up and how much money there is to go around for covering that weekend. That's who you're fucking with a boycott of going to see the new Marvel movies. So, do it if it assuages your conscience, but if you think you're striking a blow by doing it, no, it's not going to do it. Refusing to buy the DVDs or download the copies or whatnot, it's not going to do it. Pirating it instead of buying it isn't going to do it. That's not how you do it. If you want to fuck with companies about their bad decisions like this, the way to do it is the stuff people have been doing with this already, which is give them shit about it and don't let up. Raise a stink about it. call them out on social media, respond to their tweets and posts and Instagrams and stuff. Keep the hashtags going. Make noise about it and don't let up. If indeed they do fire him and keep him fired and it proves to be an unjust, unequitable thing, just keep the fact that it was done that way, make that stick publicly and permanently to this project so that it follows it around. Make it a toxic thing that hangs on to it, even if it does make money, even if it is like a hit. Now, that having been said, we don't really know what is going on here. We don't know what the actual outcome is going to be. We don't know why Variety decided to revive the discussion of this with a news story that is not a news story because, again, no new information. Like, if there was a new quote, if someone had said, hey, I'm back here, I'm an executive at Disney, don't use my name, but I have new information, then that would be a story. But this is basically, the situation has not changed. That's not news. Especially because we had previous news from earlier in the week, which also said that there were meetings going on, that he probably wasn't going to get fully rehired, despite the fact that Kevin Feige wanted him rehired and the cast wanted him rehired, but they were looking at how do we keep his script so that we can continue using that, more on that in a little bit, and also how do we make this equitable so that maybe he can come back and do another Marvel movie down the road. And the fact that you heard those two things right away, the fact that it transitioned very quickly from it's either fire him or hire him to we need to keep this script, that's a tell. And the fact that they're already talking about, well, he could maybe come back, that's a tell as well. Now, if you follow Hollywood history news stuff about situations, which are not as uncommon as you'd think, where situations like this have occurred of directors being pushed off of or pushed onto projects, there are certain things that you can look for to give you some clue as to what might be happening behind the scenes, as to what's being discussed, what's actually being discussed, and what's likely to happen. To be clear, I was 100% in support of Rehire James Gunn, the hashtag as he went, because I think it's the right thing to do, and also because I support the idea behind it in terms of saying fuck you to the Nazis that got him fired in the first place. But the idea of him being fully rehired was always a long shot. And the reason for that is not so much because it's impossible for the studio to change its mind. It's that a studio cannot really afford to look like it's changed its mind. Just the fact that it is openly and publicly known that this decision was made by one executive and is fiercely disagreed with by another executive under him, and the whole cast is a major thing. But ironically, that kind of solidifies the fact that he here meaning Alan Horn, the chairman of Disney, can't be seen as changing his mind. When you hear about weird goings-on at Disney, and there's a lot of weird goings-on at Disney in the news right now in general, weirder than you'd think for a company that seems to be riding so high, you have to frame it all through the knowledge that there is an internal power struggle happening quietly under the scenes at this company. The guy in charge of Disney is a guy named Bob Iger. You've heard me mention that name here before. Bob Iger is probably, presumed to be, I should say, going to retire as the head of Disney. Like he had the job, he has the job that Michael Eisner had before and Jeffrey Katzenberg had before him, and etc., all the way back to Walt Disney himself originally. The guy who was expected to segue into Iger's place, the heir apparent, also abruptly left the company a couple of years ago. Which has basically left there being no one really set up to be the logical guy next in line, or woman next in line to take over Disney if and when that happens. So all of this stuff that's constantly going on at Disney, you need to frame through the prism of that going on, of everyone in that company basically having their dicks out all the time in the executives and the vice presidents and the heads of the different verticals, like Kevin Feige, head of Marvel, Kathleen Kennedy, head of Lucasfilm, whoever the head of whatever the Fox vertical or verticals ends up being called turns out to be. That's the other thing. There's going to be all these new executives coming over from Fox and the News Corp acquisitions. All of these different characters at Disney are constantly walking around with their, in some cases, probably literal dicks out, showing mine is bigger, mine is stronger, I have the biggest, I'm the most powerful guy, I'm the most stable person here, and I'm in charge. And in that environment, Alan Horn, technically the highest guy up right now, cannot afford to be seen as someone whose decisions can be overridden or questioned by anyone. So even though it is very clear to anyone with half a brain, and Alan Horn did not get where he is by being a stupid man, so it is probably very clear to him as well that he got played, that he made a stupid, panicked decision in immediately firing James Gunn because he looked at this fake outrage campaign and thought, oh my god, actual people are upset about this, as opposed to a bunch of, crazy alt-right Trump fans who don't matter and nobody cares about, or at least nobody should care about, and actually fired the guy instead of taking a moment and thinking it through. But even if he knows that to be the case and understands that, he cannot, go out from his way of thinking, likely, he can't go out and say, oh, hey, I messed up, I made a bad decision, because suddenly it might look like he no longer has the biggest, most stable, most sturdy dick at Disney. In fact, it might look like, which would be the worst case scenario, it might look like someone like a Kevin Feige or some other executive at the company has a bigger one than him and might be able to override him and maybe would be better suited for his job or better suited to hop over him into another bigger job that might open up. And he can't have that. If you're in that high a position at one of these Hollywood studios, you have to look like you make a decision and it gets followed and no one questions it no matter what, even if it's wrong. Because otherwise the shareholders lose faith in you when the stock goes down and you get responsible for losses of billions and billions of dollars. It's stupid and it's fucked up and it sounds like some cartoon Game of Thrones bullshit, but this is how that business works, and that's the mindset of a lot of these people. So that's what's up there. So that is likely what is informing a lot of these kinds of decisions. Now, as such, that would also be why you almost immediately started hearing, after the initial shock of he's fired, that they were having meetings and talking about, well, we need to keep his script. Well, we need to find a way for him to direct another Marvel movie after this. We need to find another way to make his split amicable. Those are not things you usually hear about when you fire someone for, embarrassing the company with, gross jokes. Usually they just say, hey, you're out of here. They did not sit around and talk about finding a nice way to make a clean break with Roseanne. They just said, get the fuck out of here. And they did that because they already gave Roseanne a second the new show was Roseanne's second chance, and she blew it. So what you can take away from the fact that they're talking about, we need to keep his script, we need to think about finding a way for him to come back onto another Marvel movie when this dies down, is that, at the very least, Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Studios rather, knows that he needs James Gunn to come back and continue working in this universe in some context, and they are trying to find a way to make that happen that still allows Alan Horn to say, my decision to fire him still technically stands, so I still technically was not overridden, and I still have, the big, powerful, tough guy dick at Disney. And again, that sounds like dumb, stupid high school bullshit, but that's the business. Now, is this all educated guesswork supposition on my part? Yes it is. I don't have a source telling me this. I don't have, like, special information telling me this. I'm mainly hearing the same, rumors, innuendo, back and forth stuff that everyone else who reports on Hollywood gossip, bullshit, entertainment industry stuff from the outside hears. But I've been doing it long enough and following it even longer that you can look at the realities of the production and see why these things might be happening. Supposedly, for example, James Gunn did not have what's called a pay-or-play contract, which means that if they fully fire him, sever him, kick him out, they have to give him a pretty substantial amount of money for him to just go. And this is something that a lot of people writing about these things strictly from a fan perspective just do not seem to understand or don't keep track of. They're already making Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in pre-production. Like, they have his script. His script is already written. It may not be the final shooting script, but they have a script, and they've already started making costumes, building sets, drawing up a budget, casting extras, getting makeups together, doing the physical work of setting up this movie based on what he's written. So if they throw that script out and need a new script, they have to start a lot of stuff over, and this movie is already scheduled to come out at a certain time, and meeting schedules is very much a part of the Marvel and Disney agenda. They generally do not like to delay movies. They have these things set to come out at a certain time, especially Marvel, which has this whole running continuity meta-story thing to think about. Plus, and again, this is not confirmed because no one has read his script, but it's been one of these things that they've been talking about pretty openly for a long time, is that James Gunn not only was the architect of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, those were so successful that he essentially was made the architect of the cosmic outer space whole side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, they basically made him the boss of outer space Marvel in terms of how it all fits together, what the characters are like, the way it's going to look. And that is the background of what is supposed to be the next whole setting of all of the post-Phase 4 movies. That's a big deal. And there have been a lot of rumors as to what that looks like. Supposedly, the script for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was not only going to tie off the Guardians of the Galaxy storyline, finish up the loose threads from Infinity War Part 2 or whatever Avengers 4 is called, but also lay the groundwork for a bunch of other soon-to-be-announced, likely already in early development Marvel movies. And there have been rumors about what they could be. There was a unconfirmed rumor I don't totally buy that they were, right before this all fell apart in terms of the firing, that they were going to announce offhand during Comic-Con that James Gunn was going to, after the Guardians movies had ended, that he was going to direct 2 to 3 brand new Marvel movies in the Marvel Cosmic Universe that would spin out of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and it would be like Adam Warlock, Nova, and something else. I don't know if that's true, but it makes sense that they would be launching those and that his script would be part of spinning those off, setting them up in the movie. So if so, they need to keep that script, and that means they may need to keep his involvement with it. And even if they don't need it, they would probably want it. This is one of the reasons that the Marvel brand has been so successful at Disney, is because they have recognized when they need to keep certain creators around. And, I'm sure that some of the I need to keep this guy around fighting on behalf of Kevin Feige's part is probably because, hey, he's probably a decent guy, wants to do right by a guy who works for him. He very likely feels that he needs this particular creative voice to make this side of things work. And keep in mind, James Gunn also an executive producer on Infinity War. I believe he was credited as an executive producer on there because of his involvement in handling how all of the Guardian scenes were done, writing their dialogue, making sure that all fit together. So it's likely he would also have executive producer credits on a lot of the other Cosmic Marvel movies. Like, he was going to be a big wheel going forward into this. So it is pretty likely that if they are not looking to specifically rehire him for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that a lot of these meetings are about, okay, yes, Alan Horn made this stupid decision that we now have to hold to in order for him to save face because it's best for business. So what can we do to keep you around in that capacity and maybe have you back to direct another movie there? I think it has always been a long shot that he'd be back to direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I think it's pretty likely that some kind of deal is struck whereby he agrees because he is given something in sort of, background, let's do this quietly to all save face deals, remains as an executive producer, more hands-on than he seems to be for a while in the Marvel Universe going forward until he eventually comes back to direct another Marvel movie. I personally think that's how it would work out. And that sort of thing is really not unheard of at all in the business, in the Hollywood movie-making system. Like, I'm not giving away huge secrets here. These things happen all the time. Like, you just saw the business that happened with Solo, where, you replace, directors, you basically reshoot the whole movie. Right now, X-Men Dark Phoenix is essentially being completely reshot. Like, they scheduled more time to do reshoots on that movie than they had to shoot that movie. So that's pretty extraordinary. So, am I right about this? Am I wrong? The thing of it is, we won't really know what actually happens with this until probably months or maybe even years after it's gone down, because a lot of the stuff is going to be about saving face. The number one thing will be about, unless, by some miracle, they really do, because this is definitely not settled yet. If it was settled, you will know that this story is done, settled, finished, over when there is a joint statement from Disney saying, this is what's happening, we've picked a new director, which they have to do, now. They have to do, now. This has been going on way too long for them to have not picked a new director yet, unless they delay the movie, which would be an extraordinary length to go to. But, Edgar Wright had made a lot less of Ant-Man than they've made of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in terms of pre-production. So this is weird. That's the weird part about this. So, the point at which you can definitely finally say, okay, yes, this is done. James Gunn is definitely not directing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which is the likely scenario, is when they get, an official statement. Here is the new director, a full statement from Disney, and the cast says we're with this or we're not with this. They're probably going to say that we're with this. They've made their effort. They've all said in their own individual way that the secondary compromise thing is at least we keep the script, so that's going to go forward. The thing to watch for is when they finally get some kind of statement from James Gunn. Because there's going to be an issue of, if they keep his script, they're going to have to, give him, they're going to have to pay him for this work. And they're probably going to, because of this pay-or-play contract thing, unless that's been a misunderstanding on the part of everyone who's been reporting on this, they're going to have to give him a certain amount of money for not, letting him direct the movie. And there's probably going to be some back and forth about letting him out of exclusivity contracts so that he can direct other things in the interim for other studios, because, someone, probably his agents or other people, have been more than happy to release all of these, stories that I'm sure are absolutely true, of studios that are champing at the bit to hire him to direct other things as soon as he's out of this. I'm sure Sony would love to hire him to direct some things. I'm sure, wouldn't it be hilarious if he got hired to direct one of those stupid Spider-Man spinoffs? I'm sure Warner Brothers would love him to come over and direct some things. That might be a little on the expensive side. Lionsgate, Paramount would probably love getting him over there. He started in low-budget horror. I'm sure he could knock out a couple of those while he's waiting to get back into the Disney scene and the Marvel scene, which I believe he will inevitably do. But a thing to watch for is who they pick to direct. If it's someone who is associated with the MCU previously, if it's someone who is a friend of the production, if one of the Guardians actors suddenly says, I've always wanted to direct, and they decided to let me do it. If it suddenly turns out, hey, Sean Gunn would like to direct this movie, it's sort of a tell there that James Gunn is involved behind the scenes. We'll keep the executive producer credit and shadow co-direct the movie, which again, that happens more than you would think when directors get like removed from movies and quietly step back from the production but don't really. You could also look for if the part of the final decision thing here is if it comes down to keeping the script, if they hire a new director completely, but it's announced that James Gunn will stay on as an executive producer and also consult on the script to ensure a consistency of tone throughout the series, then that also means, yes, shadow producing or shadow co-directing the movie. It basically means that they've worked out a way for him to still be involved and for it still to be a James Gunn movie, but for the studio to save face and to have it not look like the studio is admitting to having made a mistake. Which, again, it sounds stupid that so much of this is about the studio not admitting out in public that it's screwed up when everyone can see that it's screwed up, but this is the way of things. And part of a deal like that would probably also look like him being able to go and either direct a movie for other studios or getting enough money that he doesn't need to go direct a movie for other studios and then showing back up directing or producing another Marvel movie in a couple of years when time has passed and even the internet Nazis can no longer be bothered to pretend to care about this. And the whole thing can be treated as basically a brain fart. Could I be wrong about all of that? Sure, I could be completely 100% wrong about all of that. It's educated guessing based on history of Hollywood and similar productions, and indeed everything is different because the nature of online discourse has changed everything. The fact that I'm not the first person to float any of this, the fact that people have been talking about these as possibilities since the beginning, it makes it a little bit possible that they may not do it because these kind of fixes don't fool people like they used to. So it may be that they feel they need to actually cut full ties and just go full steam ahead without it. But I don't necessarily see that happening, if only because it's been made so clear by so many people involved that a lot of what they were planning to do with the Marvel movies hinged on stuff they were using him to set up. And despite what people say about how the Marvel movies are producer-driven and they can just use interchangeable directors, and it doesn't really matter because the audience will go to see it anyway, I don't necessarily think that that's entirely the case. But I do think that the synergy that Marvel Studios under Kevin Feige managed after some shaky stuff with Iron Man 2 and Thor: The Dark World are their bad movies because they went in a more kind of interchangeable producer more than director way. The synergy balance between auteur sensibilities and a producer-driven studio machine model where you can have a set schedule and this has to come out on time and we're following a running meta story with a universe and continuity, but we're also leaving room for genuine auteurs like James Gunn, like Taika Waititi, like Shane Black, is the secret to a lot of the Marvel success, and it's why the Marvel machine, frankly, runs a lot better right now than the Star Wars machine does, and I say that as someone who thinks Kathleen Kennedy is really making the best of a very difficult situation, dealing with a very toxic fan base and a much higher, more specific set of corporate expectations. That said, does all of this matter? Is this a big important thing that people should be stuck on? Who directs Guardians of the Galaxy 3? I think it does matter. I think the idea of people getting fired for bullshit reasons and these things getting weaponized against people, I think it absolutely does matter. Obviously, I've said enough times already, I'm probably a broken record at this point, that it is as important as I think it is that, fair is fair, and this guy has poured his heart and his soul and genuine artistry into making what I really believe, on balance, is probably... I don't know that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are the best overall franchise in the Marvel Cinematic Universe thing, but they're definitely the most personal and the most auteur-ish films. The Guardians of the Galaxy 2 especially is probably the most soulful, personal, deep from the heart movie in that entire scope of films. It really is. And I think that to have that, I think that it would suck to have that ripped away from someone in any context. But the fact that it happens because of a bullshit campaign that was launched under false pretenses as a political hit job by, again, I stress, alt-right, white supremacist, fucking internet Nazis is just complete bullshit. And, you know, not letting that be forgotten is very important. But also, and this is a newer context to it that you can see, someone, somewhat irresponsibly, I would say, in the Variety report. I won't hang this on the writer of the Variety piece, because they could very well have been repeating words that were told to them by whomever they got the information that they were reporting from. Essentially said that Gunn was let go because his words were unacceptable in the Me Too era. And that strikes me as hugely irresponsible, because this has nothing to do with the Me Too era. It wasn't part of Me Too. He wasn't accused of anything. There wasn't a Me Too accusation. Nothing has been brought up about him. It's not connected to any of that. And what is very concerning to me is the idea that pretty much everyone who is honest and intelligent can see, like, let's be clear here. If you are looking at this and saying, because James Gunn told jokes at one point that were bad jokes, that he said were bad jokes and he apologized for, about, pedophiles, that he himself must be one, you are either a disingenuous troll pretending to think that in order to, like, advance an agenda, or you actually think that, in which case you are a fucking idiot. So it is either now or soon to be pretty much a universally accepted thing that James Gunn got completely screwed and that this was bullshit, that this was a false, fake thing, and that he should not have been let go. And if rhetorically it gets, and I can easily imagine, disingenuous assholes within, the Hollywood studio system who would love the Me Too movement, which is a genuine, real thing that has been doing a bang-up job in belatedly getting rid of assholes and getting justice for real victims of real harassment and assault and just all kinds of horrible awfulness. I can imagine scumbags who would love that thing to just go away, grabbing onto this and saying, oh yeah, James Gunn got Me Too'd and he didn't do anything, as a way to excuse and shut down, and co-opting the unjust firing of James Gunn as a way to excuse their ignoring and shutting down and disbelieving of Me Too complaints. And that would be an even bigger shame than what's going on right now, which is just awful. So in those two respects, this whole thing, both staying on this thing, continuing to make noise about it, and hoping that there is a way found around this that basically gets him back into, if not directing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, back into big movies, cosmic Marvel movies, whatever it is he wants to do. I hope that is found and executed in a way that can at least be put up as a rebuke of these shitbags that did this to him. So at the very least, if it sucks that we can't say that you can't trick Disney, because they did trick Disney, and they worked out a scenario where it looks like for Alan Horn to save face, they've got to let these shitheels win. At the very least, they can't fuck over this guy's whole life, which is probably the more important thing. So to recap, that went a little long, didn't it? The more of these will probably not quite be that long. Probably be more like, couple of minutes updates, throughout the day. Like, hey, this happened in the news today, or something like that. But, to recap, I wish and hope that James Gunn is still rehired to direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I don't necessarily think that he'll get to fully direct it. I think that was always kind of a long shot. I do think that since there is no new news coming of it and we don't have any statements from anyone, it seems like they're still working out a way for basically the company to save face, but for him to also still have some say in this or to get back in, because they've never stopped talking about, well, we're still going to use the script, well, he can probably come back and do another movie. The fact that they're still constantly talking about him personally meeting with Alan Horn as opposed to two other producers hashing it out, so which is kind of an indicator that, people are getting a story straight as opposed to, two guys figuring out what's to be done with a third guy. I could be completely wrong about that. Like I said, we'll find out. But if you were wondering what was going on and what I think about it, that's what I think about it. Hopefully, once this is cut together to take out most of the starts and stops and rambles and tangents and stutters and all of the things I do when I'm not working from a script, or rather working from, notes instead of a script, this will not sound completely incoherent. And that's what I got to say. Hashtag rehire James Gunn. And you've been watching In Bob We Trust. This will be more polished once I get it more polished. Yeah.